Welcome everyone to the latest episode of our franchise discovery series. And as you can see from that video, we'll be talking about Walfinch today. And I'd like to introduce Amrit, who is the CEO and founder of Walfinch. And as always, we'll have Jerry leading the way, and I'll be in the background making sure everything is going okay. So over to you, Jerry.
Thanks again. And that was a very helpful introductory slide from Amrit and the team at Walfinch. And let's just start with the most basic of all questions, the story behind the name itself, Walfinch.
Thank you for asking, Jerry, and thank you for having me on. I am really pleased to be sharing our story and journey here today. So my name's Amrit Dhaliwal, and the name Walfinch is slightly derived from that. So the wall bit comes from my surname, the tail end of that. And Finch really is talking about that evolutionary journey. And I'm a big believer in businesses have to keep evolving. Home care, certainly in the UK, needs a huge evolution, maybe revolution. And certainly the way that we think about wellness, the way that we look at franchising within the UK and the community here, it all needs this kind of constant evolution. And that's where that kind of word Finch has come from. So that's it.
And it's very clear early on from reading through your own website and reading about the company is that idea of personalized care, because you say the most important question of all is what kind of care do you want when you're talking to a potential client?
Yeah. And I think, at Walfinch, we talk about the concept of time to thrive. And really what that means is we're talking about aging as a much bigger concept. I think that wellness and longevity have become huge topics of conversation worldwide. And we're probably slightly behind the curve in the UK. And so we've really repositioned ourselves at Walfinch to say, well, how are we different? And we talk about aging as not the last chapter or just surviving. It's about thriving in that next stage of life.
And part of that mix and getting the mix right is finding compatibility between the person who's going to be delivering the care and the actual patient or client, I suppose. So how do you make sure that always works? Because everybody has individual needs. There are different levels of care packages which are required. So just sort of run us through that matching process.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, Jerry. So my journey started as a home care franchisee myself of a different brand. So I really understand, having been a former franchisee and operator, I really sort of understand the kind of ground level issues. So we do a lot of work with our franchisees, our training of care workers and so on to really understand who we've got. We talk about the soft skills and leadership, really learning about our members of staff. So it's not all just pennies and pounds. It's about knowing that, Samantha here has dogs and chickens and her daughter's going through X, Y, and Z issues. And then connecting that with our other clients, we call them, and just sort of understanding, well, this client would be really well suited to Samantha rather than Sarah. So if I give you an example of one of my own stories of yesteryears, is I have a wonderful carer called Paula. She was a little bit strange. And, a lot of the team didn't quite get her, and she was just obsessed with dogs. And she'd walk around, drive around with about 4 dogs in the car at any one time. And she was really interesting as a person, but very niche in terms of things that you could talk to her about. But we had a client who had engagement issues because of his mental health. And also he had problems because nobody wanted to go to him because he had this huge dog. It was a great day. It was a good old massive old thing. It looked like a horse. And we thought, okay, gosh, so how do we get over this? And I thought, well, gosh, here you go. You've got Paula over here that loves dogs. You've got this gentleman that needs someone to help him support with that. And I mean, that's sometimes there's slightly obvious things that fall in your lap like that. But other times you have to really kind of think about it and think, well, how do we kind of connect these things? One of the things I'm going through at the moment is disc profiling and thinking about, well, even when we're looking at franchise recruitment, we're talking about, well, okay, what's the personality type here? Are they well suited to us? Or actually, would they be better suited to a different brand? And maybe Walfinch isn't for them. so that we've got the chemistry right. We've got teachable people that we can then say, hey, you can go and do this same thing with your carers, with your clients. And it's not about winning all of them. It's about winning the right ones and building a business around that. I'm a big believer in the 80-20 rule.
And we'll come back to the question of Paula and matching people and everything else. But I'm very interested in the fact that, it is a specialized, a highly personal industry to be involved in. And you want to make sure that people who are interested in becoming franchise holders are actually the right mix themselves, right personality, right caring, sense of community and all of that kind of stuff. And you even have a test that people can take online just to check, it's not definitive, but it gives you a pretty good estimate as to your suitability for this industry.
Absolutely, yes. And at the end, I will share a QR code so that anyone that's joined here can go off and take the test. But really, it's just kind of asking those questions about, well, should I be self-employed in the first place? Is franchising for me? And is employment, or should I be just continue being employed? I mean, I've got a friend of mine, for example, who has often spoken to me about becoming self-employed, but actually earns really well, is very well suited to his 9-to-5 lifestyle. And my advice to him is always stay there, right? The grass always looks greener. And actually, sometimes the best advice you can give somebody is don't buy a franchise. Don't pass go, stay right there. And actually, I do that when I'm faced with franchise prospects that come into the office. I had a meeting the other week actually with somebody, and I just said, actually, this isn't right for you. In fact, there are going to be people that might want to take your money. My suggestion would be keep it in your pocket, carry on working, get some more management skill, a bit more finance, come back in 2 years, and I'd love to have a conversation with you then and see if the dial has moved.
Well, that's quite refreshing, because it has to be a proper match at every level. And that's one of the things you're saying, look, we're open for new business. We want you to come and talk to us, follow up opportunities from this conversation. But it has to be something that works on all sides. And ultimately, you're delivering a care package for people, people going into people's homes.
Yeah, truly. I mean, I've been a franchisee myself. And so for me, it's so much of it's about ethical franchising. And I travel back and forth from the States. I think they do franchising really well. And, just to learn, I've got, built relationships out there. I go to the International Franchise Convention and so on, and really just soak it in. And one of the biggest things that comes out of that for me is this concept of ethical franchising. And really, I think, well, how do we do more of that here? And I think there's some wonderful franchisors in the UK, but both in the home care market and beyond. And really, for me, I think it's building the name of franchising in the first instance and saying, well, actually, if we do a good quality service and say no more, I think saying no is part of that. Part of it is education as well. I put a lot of content out about this topic, how to buy a franchise, how to start a home care business, how to scale businesses. I've recently released a book on the same matter called Time to Thrive, the Home Care Revolution. And actually all of the proceeds from that, you can find it on Amazon, all the proceeds go to the Care Workers charity. And it's really just kind of a constant revolving thing, because I feel back in 2012, when I was looking to buy a franchise, I went online or I'd speak to people and there was marketing material, but there was no real information for me. And so I wanted to create some content for that Amrit, who was, struggling at that time to say, well, should I buy a franchise? What is franchising? What is home care? Because I came from a restaurants business. And how do I sort of understand this? So I've tried to put content out there that isn't marketing material, and it is just actually, here you go, it's free content.
As you say, we're going to put up a slide towards the end about your various social media and also your publishing. Now you've got a book, you're a bit of a powerhouse in many ways. I just want to say one little thing, by the way. We always check everything before we come on live, and the light looked fine. I'm up in the northeast of England, Amrit's in London, and Keith is in Dublin, and the light has shifted slightly, so we're slightly more in shade than we were hoping to be, but hopefully the clarity and the vision that Amrit is explaining is what matters. And I want to come back to the point you always hear about when there are discussions in the newspapers and in the media about social care, and that is the difficulty of getting staff. Staff who are not only suitable for the job, suitably qualified, but also motivated. So how do you deal with that in broad terms? And then we'll ask the question about the recent proposed changes by the British government.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would recommend reading a great book by a gentleman called Daniel Pink, and it's called Drive, and it talks a lot about how to motivate people and what motivates people. And often it's not just money. Money is actually one of the lowest things on that list. More of that is about understanding, people. We had Team Academy at our last annual conference. And one of the big things, it was a leadership coaching day for our franchisees. And one of the biggest things that came out of it was empathetic leadership and really understanding people and being able to squeeze that. Yes, sometimes your margins are tighter and you can't pay that extra £3 an hour or whatever it might be. But what you can do is spend the extra 3 minutes and say, hey, how's your day? How are you? How the kids, and keep a note of what everybody's names are and understand all of that, So for me, I think that stuff is really quite key.
Now, one of the other features, as you say, redefining social care. So the range of packages you offer could be as simple as a daily visit for maybe an hour or a few times a week. But then obviously there are people who need full-time care. So how do you manage across all of the franchises to have the number of people who are able to deliver that variety of care?
Yeah, and that's a great question. So we really have a sort of generally scaled operation there. So per location, we'll really coach people to say, okay, so let's look at the zone. Let's understand who we have here, what sort of business is going to come in. So in some situations, that will be a rural area. You'll have longer care sits. You might have live-in care packages, and it's easier then to cover that work. And so we will then hire people accordingly for that and create supply around that and really push the kind of marketing on that aspect. So it's a whole wheel, and there's a kind of supply side of it from your side. Who are you hiring? Then there is the marketing aspect of it. There's a coaching side, and also thinking about your management staff or what has their background been. If you're in a place where you want to build a learning disabilities business, for example, you're then going to be looking at recruiting people like that. I'm a huge believer in getting the right people behind you that can help scale your business. And I think the person that is constantly behind the till will have an issue. And what we're all about is scaling businesses. Our top franchisee will do £4 million in her. And she's been trading 5.5 years now. And that's, that's not average. That's well above average. But I think the thing that she's done is she's got out of her way and she's recruited people around her. She's focused on the networking and really focused on motivating the right people and scaling the business. And that's really what I'm interested in helping people do.
Yeah, and one of the points you also make is that involvement with the community that you're trying to serve, that it makes good sense in the broadest term, but also makes good business sense. If you're involved in sort of local health initiatives, you're reaching out to different members of the community, and that's something that you actively encourage all franchise holders to get directly involved with.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I'm a huge believer in the marketing effort, and if this business is not for somebody that wants to sit behind a keyboard. This is not for them, and I would openly say that I may be shooting myself in the foot and closing the door on various people. But I would say that if you are not actively working in your community and interested in shaking hands with people, this isn't for you. This is very much belly to belly. Might be that for that kind of person, a a business that is appropriate for them might be a resale that's doing over £1 million in revenue and so on. And for someone that wants to work solely in that kind of management piece, that might be fine for them. But for somebody that is taking a kind of virgin territory and developing that to a multi-million pound business, that person needs to be doing some shoe leather work. And I think that, I unapologetically say to people, the business is out there.
Something which you've already put out there, we've touched on, is the range of output you've given in the broader sense in terms of leadership and social care and connectivity and everything else. But once somebody takes up a franchise, I mean, this is not only a very personalized industry, but it's quite a technical industry in terms of the requirements, particularly when it comes to compliance. So what is the backup from the head office in terms of making sure that somebody new to the industry can actually comply with everything that's required?
I'm so glad you asked, Jerry. I thought you'd never ask. It's my favorite question. So I think there's a couple of things there. Number one, again, having been a former franchisee, I've really understood the life cycle of a franchisee. And day one, you need heavy loaded support, but day 1,000, you need very targeted support in a very different way. So one of the things that we do with a new franchisee, and I must say that majority of the people that come to us are people that are not from the home care sector or social care at all. And I actually quite like that, because we're then not unpicking bad habits that they've collected from somewhere else. And so it's really about sort of saying, actually, we've got blue sky thinking, and I'm all about 1% growth every day. Off we go. Now, what do we do? So we put on a 2-week training program, half of which is in person, the other half online. We have a CQC kind of coaching process for the franchisee and the a registered manager, and that so CQC is Care Quality Commission, and that is the UK. That is England. Around the UK, you'll have the Scottish Inspectorate, and Wales, their equivalents, Ireland, and so on. So we can operate with all of those guys, and we will coach a franchisee and their manager on how to get through that interview process. So we do all of that piece with you, and we're very much there as your coaches. Then you've started, we will then support you through a various different level of angles. So we have the first year of accountancies included. And what we do there is we've got an accountant that we work with that I've actually created with the co-founder to have very targeted support for a franchisee in that first year. So I'm not expecting people to be financially literate. I'm also, because I understand that a P&L report that is benchmarked against my whole network will give me a story. So if I look at your P&L report, I'll look at the money you're spending on mileage, and I'll tell you about your staffing in the office, because I understand that if that number is above a certain level, then all of a sudden I've got staff that are going to be leaving because they're traveling too far, your retention is lower, you've probably got a problem with the coordinator, and if I got feedback, your net promoter score would probably be lower, and so on. So it's not just the numbers, it's how the numbers then are analyzed and connected into the working operations. So you've got that, and we work through having that process and that kind of management accounts and so on. So it's very kind of targeted support from the finances. You've got the CQC compliance, and then it's then saying, right, okay, from day one, it's you take on this one care package or one carer. How do we then make sure that you understand and you learn how to do that process? Is it fit, and does it fit the process? And then we go into auditing from a compliance side on a very regular basis, because everything is digitalized and we can tap into that. We have a great compliance head called Amanda Keeler, who was on the Home Care Insights Power List last year or this year, one of the years, and so
she knows what she's doing.
She knows what she's doing. She gets into your data and says, great, this care plan is good because this care plan could be better because, and so we really work with you to say, how do we sort of push you towards getting that outstanding rating. Then on the business support, which is really, I would say 2/3 of where our time is spent, we have very senior level franchise support people that have been in the sector for 10, 20 years, whether that's franchising or business or care, and people that really can help you go from zero to 6, 7, 10, 15 million pounds, and say, well, what I never wanted was a franchise support manager that can only help you in that first leg, and then all of a sudden you're really kind of knowledgeable, and the support is down here and it never catches up. So we've kind of bridged that gap and said, well, we give you heavy going stuff straight off the bat. With that person, you can expect a daily call in the first 30 days, a weekly thereafter, and if you need more, great. A Zoom call, an in-person every quarter, online workshops, in-person workshops, an annual conference, a monthly newsletter. We literally hit it, a podcast, video content, the operations manual. We hit it from every different angle and say, well, you might learn differently to me, Jerry. You might love video. I might love reading lots of prose. We try to create that for both people. Keith might like a daily text. I might like a daily 15 minutes, and so on. So it's really kind of saying, well, what works for different people? How do we do that? And how do we scale that? And then my team gets together on a quarterly basis with me to say, right, what's the feedback from the network? What do we need to drive at for the next 90 days? Let's be super targeted. What's going to help build your bottom line? Once a month, my whole team, all management people, get together and look at profit and loss of every single franchisee, not just top line where we make money, but bottom line where you make money. Because what I understand as a former franchisee is that if you are super profitable, you will be a raving fan. You will build your business bigger. You will tell your cousin about it, who'll then buy another franchise and will scale to a global brand. And that's really what I'm interested in, helping people thrive and have that entrepreneurial success.
And on your very good website, walfinch.com, there are examples of people who've managed to scale, and they recognize and they, open about the first year. It can be a little bit tricky because there's a lot to take on, but there is that backup support, which you've outlined very clearly. But then there are the opportunities to expand. So in terms of the geographical areas that people might get responsibility for, in the broadest terms, because obviously these are conversations which are required at a more advanced stage, but how does the breakdown of which are the market territories still available to potential new franchise holders? So
we're really kind of relational, to be honest. So we'd love to hop on a quick call with anyone that is interested and kind of have that kind of vetting process of saying, well, actually, do you like us? Do we like you? And we kind of move on and then really dig straight into, I prefer people to have a territory near where they live. We have territory available. Actually, so if I think about the UK, we've already carved it up into over 220 locations, of which we might have 37 that we've sold. So we've got some really good quality territory available. So that's often not the problem. We've got lots of opportunity there, and then it's going through that next stage process of saying, well, does it fit for you? Actually, our territories are pretty big. Again, having been through the journey myself, what I understand is rather than keep paying me lots of money to take on more and more area, we just give you a territory that you can put 2 or 3 offices in the first place, and so that'll keep you busy for the next decade.
Well, you've certainly been busy over the last while, because we've already mentioned on several occasions not only your new book, but you do a podcast. You're very active on social media, and I think you have a slide that you can actually give us some more information on that, including hopefully the QR code, which can open up another area of conversation. So let's see if we can get those up. We've been trying this beforehand.
Can you see this?
We can see that.
Yeah, there it is. Yeah, it's all there.
Here we go. Actually, talking about that, that's Sarah Wickham in the middle, who won the top revenue award, actually 3 years on the trot. So this year, I think she'll do about £3.5 to £4 million in revenue.
Wow.
So she was our first franchisee. This QR code will take you to my podcast, which is called Walking with Walfinch. It is a walk and talk concept because I'm, all about thriving and wellness. And so actually I thought, well, why doesn't our content match that? So I meet people often at Hampstead Heath. We go through, probably knock out about 8,000 steps and have a 30-minute conversation invariably. And it's quite fun because you'll hear people panting and then or tripping up, actually, as I did in the winter months a bit, and so on.
Try and keep the terrain flat.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, yeah. So when you're on, Keith, we'll keep the terrain flat. So,
yeah.
So Walking with Walfinch. There's a few others here that might be useful, but that's a podcast that I have filmed internationally. I've been to Phoenix, to Vegas, and London, filming that with speakers all around the world, and that's been going for a year. It comes out every other Wednesday. In between that, I have on YouTube a wellness series called Wellness with Walfinch, and that comes out again only every other Wednesday, but the other Wednesdays. And that is a small kind of exercise class that you could do or with older loved ones and so on. And every second Thursday, I have a newsletter that comes out on my LinkedIn. So if you go onto my LinkedIn, you can subscribe to it, and that comes out. And that's usually high value information that I just give away. My new book, which is called Time to Thrive, The Home Care Revolution, can be found on Amazon. And here's a QR code that will take you to that. And it's all about how to start, build, scale a home care operation, and a little bit about where I see the problem and the solution around that. So with my kind of 12, 13 years of experience, what have I seen? And if I was starting again, what would I do? I've currently just been awarded the business ambassador role for the Royal Osteoporosis Society, which is quite fun, I must say. So excited about that. And so a lot of the work that we'll be doing, both on our social media and fundraising, will be directed to that. And Queen Camilla was our initial patron. My social medias are here. So you've got on LinkedIn, I'm Amrit Dhaliwal. On Instagram, I'm Amrit_Walfinch. And on YouTube, weirdly, it is Amrit-the-Walking-CEO. But we have a Walfinch YouTube as well, but these are my personal things. And on LinkedIn, the sort of content that you can expect is, the updates, the headlines are kind of analytical thinking. On Instagram, it is really kind of on-the-go stuff. So I'm sure that we can do a quick video. In fact, should we do that right now and get everyone?
Here we go.
And here we go. Let's stop this share. And so you'll expect things like this. I'm here with Franchise Direct. And making a quick reel for Instagram and see this on the stories. And thank you for.
We're going to be famous, Jerry.
Yeah, Jerry.
Yeah, he's but you see that's what I like, Amrit. That's what I think is kind of inspiring in a way, because you're going back to the basics, saying of a franchise holder to be connected, involved with the community, and you're involved with a community in the broadest sense, and you're providing a lot of very helpful information. And also, you're evolving the role of what a modern CEO should be all about.
I really think that, and I've just turned 38 this year, and so I'm sort of slightly of a different generation where the embarrassment level, I suppose, is or non-existent even, I suppose, after a while. But and I do think that as a leader, the situation has had to change, and I really implore people to have a look at the YouTube channel, because my YouTube channel, I've really tried to curate knowledgeable information for you buying a franchise or driving any kind of business, actually, and really kind of digging into that. So it's quite a fun process overall, I must say, and really kind of thinking about how do we scale businesses and what is the role of a leader, and what does that open itself up to. I was invited to GB News for a live debate last week, and it was all around the policy changes within with migrants and visas.
Sure.
And
what was your core takeaway from the change that the government has announced, which is basically we're going to put a big stop on the amount of overseas carers who will be given a visa to come into the UK?
I think, I mean, the reality is that they've already U-turned it by opening up the European route for younger workers. So I think they understand that it's a political move. It's been poorly thought out, personally. And I think what they've now tried to then do is kind of backdoor that with a kind of relaxing Brexit type of arrangement. So the hope is that that won't impact providers to a significant level, but I think it absolutely will hurt some providers. At Walfinch, one of the things I've always said to franchisees is keep your overall workforce at below 20% migrant workers, because you just don't know which direction of travel the government will take. They don't know, right? So I think it's really always trying to predict the future. And I think my job as a franchisor is always look around the corner. So we really focus on high value, high margin work, which allows you to then attract a better type of local person that might be otherwise not interested in care because of the finance around it. And we've been...
Well, I think just on that, there should be, just on exactly what you said, there should be a big degree of symmetry between what you're saying in terms of upskilling British people, if you like, or people who've been resident in the UK for a long time, to get better skills to go into that industry, which is badly needed in terms of the amount of employees in the future and everything else, but by providing the skills and better terms and conditions. I mean, that's what the government in its broader sense is saying, but as you say, there's a huge gap between the rhetoric and then the reality of how it feeds through to the care sector in the broadest sense.
Yeah, I mean, I think there needs to be planning around these things, and without kind of getting political now, I think the problem that we have is that when things are not well thought out from a planning perspective, that will hurt sectors like the social care sector. I think there will be providers like Walfinch that won't be impacted in the same way. That I know, colleagues of mine in the sector that are heavily leveraged on migrant workers, not just in franchising, but non-franchise businesses. And I think they will be, really having to think about how they navigate their growth. And for me, it's always been focus on the margins. Why are we not leading the way with higher charge rates? Somebody's going to pay it, and then we're creating a new high. And I think for me, it's always about that. And then saying, well, okay, once that's done, then we've got a more kind of cushion to play with, and all of a sudden local staffing and training and so on becomes very different. And often, because we are private pay, we are not so worried about having people that are doing 60 hours a week in terms of care workers. We're actually looking for lots of part-time staff, because that makes our lives easier from many ways. So it's really kind of looking at it from that perspective overall.
And I think that's a good summary of where the sort of national debate is at present. But let's go back to the start, and what we've highlighted throughout the conversation is the huge amount of resource and research material which you've already made freely available via the podcast, the YouTube, and your social media channels. And you would certainly recommend people interested in continuing this conversation to have a look at those first. And then, Keith, have there been any other questions that we need to follow up?
And also, if anyone didn't get a chance to take down Amrit socials, they will be sent out in an email after as well. So just in case you missed it, you can access them there. And yeah, we have a few questions rolling in.
The test, the entrepreneurial test, if we can add that to your email, that'd be really helpful. Thank you.
I'll get that sent out as well. And we have a few questions if you want to take some questions.
Yes, please. Yeah, go ahead.
Don't, just for anyone asking questions, a lot came in, so I don't think we'll get through them all, but I'll pick out a few. First one that came in is there any plans of Walfinch expanding outside of the UK into other countries?
Yeah, I mean, I think our 10-year goal is to be an international brand. The next place we may look to go is broaden out to the States. It's not something that we would look to do anything with for the next 5 to 7 years, but certainly it's on the bigger picture.
Cool. And then we also have for training. I know you might have touched on some of these things, but for training, you provide training, and where does the training take place? And also day-driven, what kind of capital would they need to invest in a Walfinch?
Great. All great questions. So I think, as I said earlier, I mean, our training is robust and it kind of carries on for years, quite frankly. I'm here in London today because we've got a training day for all of our franchisees, an open seminar all about networking and how to do it today. So our training carries on. The fixed training that you'll get is a 2-week training, 1 week in Oxfordshire. We put you up in a hotel and 1 week online. And capital wise, I tend to say you need about 110 to 120,000 pounds. Invariably, most people come with about 50% in cash and the other 50% on lending.
Perfect. And someone has asked, do you help with Ofsted as well as with CQC? That might make more to you than with me.
Yeah, no.
Okay, and then how do you differ from other care franchises?
I think our biggest differentiator is that we are a brand that is focused on wellness for older people. So we are not just about providing care and cleaning bums. We're really about thriving in your later years. So our whole concept is aging is not the last chapter; it's the beginning of the next one.
Okay, and maybe we'll do one more question. Is how do franchisors? What's the best way of them finding their employees and stuff? What's the best way? How do they go about finding?
Right. So how do you find carers? I mean, I could be here for weeks talking about this. You know, at any one time there might be 20 channels, and if you're not hitting 5 of them all at the same time, there is an issue. And so we'll really coach you through and looking at, well, okay, you've done this has happened. Now let's try that. Let's tinker with this, and it's all A/B testing all the way through for years and years. And actually, whether you were a £5 million business or a £0 business, often the activity is the same to get to the next.
Well, there's a good few other questions there, but what I will say to people is, if I didn't get to ask Amrit your question, there is going to be, if you just hang on for a second after this webinar, you'll be redirected to a Calendly link for the team at Walfinch, and you can ask them anything and everything.
And Amrit, just to say, the volume of questions which came is a very good reflection of the interest that you've generated, and hopefully in the language of franchise directors, it will lead to future leads. But you've certainly given people enough signposts along the way to really think about the potential for the business and their suitability for it.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me on. It's always fun, but a huge pleasure to be involved.
Yeah, thank you very much, Aaron, and thank you, Jerry, as well. And yeah, one thing as well, my mum was in home care for years, and if she was ever going back into it, I think Walfinch sounds like a place that really focuses on the people and not just the money side of it. And I think you've really shown that today as well.
Oh, thank you very much, Keith. I appreciate you saying that.
Thank you very much. So yeah, I think that brings us to an end. Thank you, guys.
Thanks very much.
Yeah, everyone will get the emails as well, and you can contact Amrit and the team there. So thanks for joining us today, everybody.
Super duper.
Bye now.